Hello, welcome to the latest Simplify podcast. I'm joined here today with Kate, a director from Simplify Consulting, and obviously myself, consultant. We're going to have a chat today about the metaverse. We've got some sort of conflicting views between us on the matter, so I thought if we record it, we can sort of get a discussion going around it and sort of get other people's views at the same time. So before we make a start, a quick sort of overview of what a metaverse is, or what their metaverse is, should I say. The metaverse is effectively a virtual universe. It's a place in a digital space, so online digital space, where you can replicate the real world, so whatever that might be. There's various versions of the metaverse, and I'm sure most people probably heard the term. But as a broad term, it is very much a virtual universe. So the key things we're going to sort of be chatting about is how a metaverse can be used within a business setting. We often see it and probably hear it being used in an entertainment sort of gaming setting, if you will, but not so much a business operational area is sort of the key area we'll be looking at. So as I mentioned, there's a few industries that already use the metaverse, or at least a version of the metaverse. So key ones being sort of healthcare, so doctor training, surgical training is a great sort of area. Aviation and flight simulators for pilots. Again, it's that virtual sort of interaction and training element that's being used. And of course, as I already mentioned, the entertainment area, so gaming, virtual events, virtual concerts we've already seen in various different locations, and sort of they've been received really well. I think the thing that we want to discuss here is how that translates into a business operational area, and where it can be used, the sort of use cases that are there, and of course the challenges that are going to come across in terms of using that technology. So starting with use cases then. So one that translates directly is, of course, is training. So in most of these other industries, training's where it's being used, and of course it can be used in the operational space as well. I guess in my head, I've got quite a clear picture on how that would work and how a user would sort of interact with it in an ideal world. Of course, you've got the challenge of how does it improve on what we currently have when it comes to training. And I guess one use case that I've read quite recently was an insurance firm that was using it to help the call operatives sort of experience what it's like to have certain illnesses or disabilities. So the metaverse isn't purely virtual, it's the use of hardware in a virtual space. So that element was things like they were putting on these special gloves that would restrict your finger movements and so on, sort of replicating some illnesses and things that people have that they interact with on a daily basis, therefore giving those call handlers sort of empathy towards those calls and to understand and make that journey better for the customer. Another element, of course, is remote working. So having the ability to be in a space with co-workers that aren't physically with you. And there's various different levels of the technology you can use to do that. You could do it via a laptop. Of course, you've got the more traditional way when people think of metaverse, it's via like a VR headset sort of thing, but that comes with its own challenges, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a sec. But the ability to sort of collaborate with your workforce regardless of where they are. And I think in this sort of post-COVID world, remote working and where your workforce are based are sort of becoming a bit more irrelevant to a business, and the ability to virtually commute is becoming much more of a requirement than ever before.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think, as you said, Rich, we've got quite differing views, haven't we, on the metaverse? I find the metaverse quite a difficult concept to understand. I'm a a kind of touchy-feely person. I'm a person who likes to see, feel emotion, and I feel like the metaverse. Well, I just said I feel like the metaverse is just quite a transactional environment. So I think whilst some of the use cases you've just talked about there are really powerful, actually, especially the one where an individual can experience a disability and then really have empathy with a customer who's got a vulnerability or a disability. I think the remote working piece is quite interesting. So I remember back in COVID when no one was allowed to see anyone, basically, were we? It was all virtual, Zoom meeting hell or Teams meeting hell. Um, and I think as a population, everyone probably agreed that they missed that human interaction. They missed being with other people, and not saying at work we all touch each other or anything like that, but it's just like being in the same environment as someone else, not a fake environment, which I think that's what the metaverse is. It's fake, it's virtual. Um, but actually being able to see someone's expression or see someone's body language. And I think with training as well, again, I think the metaverse offers a really cost-effective option. However, one of the reservations I might have is if you're in a classroom, you can see someone struggling because you can probably pick up on body language and maybe the fact that they don't understand something, but they might not be confident to say. So maybe you can pull them aside and have a bit of a side conversation with that person to make sure that they understand. In the metaverse, are they hidden? It kind of feels a little bit like you can hide behind an avatar, which also could have positive things because obviously if you struggle with confidence, you know, that obviously is a great way to build your confidence. I know my daughter is quite a shy individual, but once she gets in Minecraft, she chats to everyone. So, you know, I could definitely see the positives, but I also have some reservations about how it lacks that human touch.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you probably just touched on most of the key challenges that I see the metaverse having in sort of a operational space. And a lot of that is around the technology limitations that we currently have. So you said about the ability to sort of read body language
Mm,
and sort of feel like that person is there physically next to you is sort of impossible in the metaverse. And at the moment, I completely agree. I think the technology is
mm,
just not there yet to convey that the facial expressions and the user's body language. Um, albeit I've got no doubt that will change. Um, so in my head, a metaverse is a great solution. I don't think it's quite there yet, and the way
mm,
that we as humans interact with it needs to improve because if you look at the physical hardware you need to really sort of engage with the metaverse, you traditionally need a VR headset. Yes, you can do it via a laptop, but it's never going to be as
mm,
sort of succinct with you, or just it's not going to feel like you're there. You're still there working on your laptop. The VR headset gives you that ability to be there. However, they're heavy, they're ugly,
mm.
they're extremely expensive. Like Apple's recent product is $3,500, I think,
Wow.
and that's still not a good enough solution for a user to sit there and wear it for 6 hours a day or whatever it is. And it still has limitations, as you just said, in terms of sharing body language, sharing facial expressions, and having that non-verbal communication that's so important to us as humans. Um, the way technology progresses, I've got no doubt it will get there, but I think we're still looking sort of 5, even 10 years off, really, before we get to that level of integration. However, in the meantime, I think there are still use cases where we can bring it in and use it. And like you just said, for people that are a bit shyer in person, and that probably covers me as well, I'm much more I'm much more comfortable in a virtual space than I am in a
Mm,
physical space. Um, so I guess it's a solution to a problem. I don't think it's the solution to all problems.
no,
Um,
I guess it's
and
down to the individual as well, isn't it? But
yeah,
I do think the generation, so my daughter, she's 14, you know, I find it sad actually that she enjoys being part of a virtual world rather than a real one. So at the weekend, she'd much prefer to be with her mates virtually rather than out getting a bit of sun, a bit of, vitamin D, fresh air, which I think all of that is actually really important from a mental health and kind of well-being perspective as well, rather than cooped up in a bedroom, still socializing, but in this fake world that doesn't exist. I mean, the funny thing is they watch people playing games, so they don't play the game themselves. They actually just watch someone do it. Same about, doing a sport. Like they'll watch someone doing something rather than going out and experiencing it themselves. I do say to them, like, why don't you go out, go to the park? But that's just me probably being a bit of an old fuddy-duddy, to be honest.
I think it's all about balance and moderation, right? It's all about it's the same thing in the business world. You're going to have people that want to be there in person, and you always will, because you just get everyone's different. That's everyone's attitude's different towards work. I'm definitely the person that would quite happy to work from home every day, but I fully accept people on the flip side who want to be in the office and be around people every
Mm,
day. And until those two sort of ways of working can really integrate, I think the metaverse will struggle. And that's sort of for me, that's the key area, that it needs to improve the way that it can be almost omni-channel down to the person and how the person wants to interact with it.
mm,
And that's where things like, because you could argue you could be in the office with a VR headset on, but if you go to an office and everyone's got their VR headsets on, what's the point
yeah,
of being in the office?
yeah.
You need a different sort of technology and hardware solution when it comes to that. But at the same time, you don't want the people that are electing to use their VR headsets at home to then miss out from that office experience. They
Mm,
also then need to be included. So it's really interesting, but I think it's, like I said, it still needs more use cases. It needs more investment from a technology level, um, which I think we'll get there, because technology firms are showing their interest in it. You still got uh, Meta, owner of Facebook, and then you've got Apple as well, that's obviously released their hardware recently, and that are still pushing the VR route. I think the uptake's been slower, which is why the progress is a bit slower. But I can still see it being a sort of a place to be, if you will,
mm,
especially with the younger generations that are growing up with this level of technology just at their fingertips. I think they're much more keen to stay in that world, and they see the benefit of it. But yeah, at the same time, I agree with you that going outside sometimes isn't a bad thing either.
I guess you were saying like the cost as well. It's quite a barrier to entry, actually, isn't it?
Massive.
Um, and whether that creates a bit of a divide in itself.
Yeah,
Those with lower incomes or less disposable income that can't afford a VR headset, you know, they're going to miss out on that virtual world as well.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
businesses, that's going to be a massive cost, a massive investment, for businesses to have to invest for all of their employees to have VR headsets. Don't
Yeah.
know.
It's such a big change, and yeah, it is a massive investment that won't have immediate returns, which is where businesses, I think, will struggle to really get on board. And like I say, from a personal user interview point of view, it's in itself a cost barrier. It's you could akin it to almost having a phone. So if you go back
Mm,
to sort of the 80s when mobile phones start to become a thing, they were ridiculously expensive,
yeah.
and it took them what, 10, 15, 20 years before smartphones as we know it today sort of became mainstream and
Mm,
affordable for most people. VR is probably going to be slower. Well, I say VR, the metaverse, therefore VR will be slower, because I think there is just people struggle to see how it benefits them over just a laptop or a phone. There are benefits, but the design of the VR headset and the way that the user has to interact with it, it's just not as nice, and it's therefore takes longer to develop this sort of technology.
mm,
I think it will get there. It's just a case of it will take time, and of course, once they get to a sort of a mass market percentage, that's when costs start to drop, and it opens up the barrier to everyone else, and people can start joining. But ultimately, at the moment, yeah, cost is a big issue, because even for a cheaper VR headset, you're still looking for sort of £500, £600,
mm, yeah.
which is just so expensive for the use cases at the moment. Effectively, a toy, it's an entertainment tool, which is more of a novelty in most people's heads, I think, rather than a necessity, unlike a mobile phone.
Mm.
Okay, wonderful. Well, that was, I think a really interesting conversation. And like I say, our views are sort of almost on the polar ends here, but it's interesting. I think it's really interesting where we still agree in terms of, yes, people's attitudes need to change, and generationally it will, but at the
Mm.
moment we're still very much sort of, let's get in the office, let's see in person. And you got my side of it, which is let's not do that. um I don't think anyone's right. I suppose that's it. Every human is unique, and really the technology needs to embrace that, and
Mm.
allow people to interact with it how they want to. But yeah, that's been a really interesting chat. So thanks for your time, and yeah, thanks all for listening.
Thank you, Rich.